Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today is another solo episode, and I'm sharing a podcast playlist with you again, this one on death education. So take a listen. I'll be covering lots of previous episodes from the archives, but we'll talk all about why each one of us needs to think of ourselves as a teacher, an educator for people in our community around death, dying, and grief, and lots of tips and suggestions for how to increase death awareness in your own community and how to get started teaching if you're interested in doing that. So I hope you find this of benefit. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe using the button down below. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. And go to eoluniversity.com/support if you're able to make a small financial contribution to keep this podcast on the air. And we'll move on. I'm going to be showing you slides. So those will come on now. And I hope you enjoy it. Today, I'm sharing with you another podcast playlist where I've gone back through all of the archives for End of Life University and found episodes that I think might be useful to you around the topic of death education. For several years, death education was my theme, and I did a lot of episodes based around this topic and interviewed people who had a lot to contribute around death education. And I thought it might be nice to share with you those older episodes so you can look back and see if maybe there's something you missed that you didn't listen to before that you'd like to take in now, especially if you want to increase your knowledge and awareness about the importance of death education. And before we get started, once again, a little pitch for my books, which I don't always talk about, but I decided I will utilize these solo episodes just to mention my 4 books that are available right now: 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, The Journey from Ego to Soul, Stories from the Dark Night, and The Tao of Death. Buying my books is one of the ways that you can help support me in the work that I'm doing. And also benefit from reading the books. The 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying is my book of stories from hospice patients I cared for and the spiritual lessons I learned from them. The Journey from Ego to Soul is a sequel to 7 Lessons, where I review the 7 lessons and the challenge of actually living those lessons with other stories from my life and how I learned to put those seven lessons into effect and to really begin to embody those lessons that I learned from my hospice patients. Stories from the Dark Night is a collection of short stories, essays, and poems that I wrote during the years when I was grieving over my father's suicide death. And the subtitle for this book is Writing as a Tool for Grief. And so I have some other tips and thoughts on how to utilize writing in the way that I did on this journey through the dark night of grief. And then the Tao of Death is an adaptation of the Tao Te Ching, which is an ancient book of Chinese philosophy. And I rewrote the verses, I adapted them to include death. And so interesting and a very inspired book with a really deep spiritual meaning. So those are my 4 books. They're all available on Amazon, but you can also go to the website eoluniversity.com/books, and you'll see all of them there with links if you'd like to purchase them. The Journey from Ego to Soul has an audiobook that I recorded if you like to listen. So we'll move on with the slides here. I did want to mention, again, there are slides, just like with the playlist before. You can view those on YouTube if you'd like in a video format. You can also go to the show notes at eolupodcast.com. This is episode 469, and you'll be able to view the slides on that webpage or download a handout there a handout of the slides and also a handout with all the links that I'm bringing you here today, and there are a lot of them. So buckle up because we have a lot to go through. And so I'm starting out with just a little collection here. I'm calling it Death Education 101 series of episodes. These are some of the episodes I did back when I was really focusing on death education. Most of them are solo episodes that I recorded. And so the first one I'll refer to you is why death education is important. And here's a few things that I covered in that episode that death education is really essential right now because we're living longer and developing complex diseases that require a lot more complicated thinking and decision making. Medical technology continues to advance rapidly, so we're able to prolong life, but sometimes patients don't want that. And we have to think it through. We have to learn about it and talk about it in order to make these challenging decisions at the end of life. Um, our society is also divided over ethical and moral dilemmas around end of life issues like medical aid in dying and removal of life support. And it's really helpful to have more education for people on those topics. And we know that being unprepared for death has a high financial cost, resulting in too much medical care and also wasteful after death disposition of the body. And then there is an emotional and spiritual cost to ignoring death that I cover in an additional episode. So that is why death education is important. And you can listen to that full episode if you want to get more information. Um, one of my favorite episodes ever is episode 130, How Death Awareness Can Change the World, because I read a study it was a review study of other studies that had been done on the effects of death awareness and increasing death education in various communities and societies. And these results were just remarkable. And I got really excited about this idea that we could make such an impact on our world by improving death education, but with each one of us deciding, no matter what other work we do in this field, we are going to become educators. We are going to teach people about death, dying, and grief. And so, I'm just going to summarize a few of the results from these studies that have been done on death awareness, that they found helping behaviors increased when people were given reminders of their mortality. And that included compassion, tolerance, empathy, and pacifism. Pro-environmental behaviors increased for people with heightened death awareness, which we certainly need right now. We need people to become much more aware of what's happening to our planet. Positive health behaviors increased, such as quitting smoking, starting an exercise program, and performing breast self exams for people who became aware of death. And then people with fundamentalist religious values who had previously rejected members of other religions were more likely to show compassion toward those of other groups when they experienced greater death awareness. This is in contrast with, we sometimes talk about Becker's work, the denial of death, where he talked about a death terror, where people who are terrified of death actually are more likely to reject people from other groups. But when we give people a positive awareness of death and positive education about death, it actually moves the other direction. People show more compassion to those who are different from them. And I think that's really exciting. And again, the world needs all of these changes right now. So, that episode number 130, please take a listen to it, even if you don't listen to anything else, because it will inspire you to want to teach everyone you know and improve their death awareness. Next was an episode called How to Be a Great Death Ed Teacher, where I just talked about some of the qualities that can help you teach death education, like flexibility, creativity, curiosity, and open mindedness, and also how to choose the topics that you might want to talk about based on your passion, your knowledge and training, and your life experience, and finding overlaps of those three as you decide what it is that you want to teach. Next, episode 127, the consequences of ignoring death. And these are important. And sometimes I think maybe we can bring up some of these topics when we're explaining to people why they need to listen to us and learn from us and become more death aware. And so here's just a brief listing of some of those consequences. We think there's always more time when very often there isn't more time. And therefore, we don't make the decisions that need to be made in a timely manner. And we don't take steps or act in a way that is needed right now. We put things off and wait because we think there's more time than there is. Next, we forget that life is fragile, and sometimes we don't value life, and that includes our own planet and life on our planet. We don't recognize that life is fragile and fleeting, and we don't take proper care of ourselves, of our neighbors, of our earth. We don't cherish our relationships as much as we might if we saw that, oh, I have this person here with me today, but it's life is just so fragile. I may not have this person tomorrow. We don't appreciate change. Oftentimes in our society, we resist change. We try to prevent change when change is sort of the engine of growth, of life, of evolution. And our fear of death can cause us to hide away from change and try to prevent it. um, we are unable to find meaning in life without an awareness of death and again of life's preciousness and fragility. We may not get to the deeper meaning of life and how to make the most of it. And then finally, we don't live life fully if we're spending our time avoiding death and thinking about death and talking about it. When if we simply embrace mortality, we're much more likely to live fully and enjoy life more fully. So those are some of the topics that I bring up in this episode number 127. And now that I gave you that summary, maybe you don't need to listen to it, but I just am trying to give you an idea of whether or not you might want to hear it. Next, episode 129, I did an interview with my friend Stacy Smith, who used to teach a death ed class to college students. I don't believe she's teaching it right now for various reasons, but this was really important. I was a guest teacher at her class for many semesters, and she just did a wonderful job creating this class, and she's so open and sharing in this interview that I think it could be helpful to anyone who wants to get excited about teaching. She shares ideas from her lesson plan, including projects, assignments, field trips that she did with her students. She talked about tips for teachers, and you'll just hear Stacy's excitement for teaching when you listen to our interview. And again, sadly, right now, I don't believe she's teaching that course, but it was a fantastic course. And her students, when I got to go in and guest teach, I heard from them how important this class was to them and what a difference it was making in their lives. So check out this interview if you're interested in teaching college students at all. This will really inspire you. Um, let's see. I'll move on to an interview with Rena Lazar and Michelle Pante from Willow EOL. And currently, so see, life goes on, a change happens. And currently, Michelle Pante is no longer involved with Willow EOL. It's just Rena at the helm of Willow EOL. But at the time of this interview, Michelle and Rena were working together, and I interviewed both of them. And our interview was called Training EOL Educators to Change the World. Again, my thinking of, yes, if we promote death education and death awareness, we're going to change the world in a positive way. And we talked about Willow EOL's campaign to educate EOL educators. And so we talked about the importance of end of life education, why they were inspired to create their program, who could benefit from working with Willow EOL and becoming a Willow EOL educator, what their program includes, how participants can tailor their own workshops using Willow's materials, which is amazing. If you want to teach but you're not sure what to teach, you don't feel like you have the time or energy or creativity to begin from scratch and put together all your own materials and handouts and curriculum and gather your own ideas, this Willow EOL educator program is amazing and would be a wonderful place to start to get the curriculum that you need and get trained in being an educator. And so there will be a link in the show notes page to their educator program, so you can look it up online. That is Willow EOL. Rena Lazar is running that program now, and check out the episode. Remember that some things have changed, and uh, go and look at the website and learn more about Willow. Next, episode number 370, I talked about the Date with Death Club, exploring mortality and community with Reverend Karen Johnston. And Karen also created a curriculum for expanding death awareness. She is a reverend, a minister, but she created a secular curriculum covering lots of different topics, which we talk about during our interview together, and how they can be used in a variety of ways. She talks as well about addressing echo grief and addressing that when we teach our classes, helping people with grief they might be feeling over changes on our planet. Karen is offering her materials for free, no charge, to get her curriculum, and then how to get involved and utilize the curriculum in your own community. And her website is datewithdeathclub.com, and you can check it out on her website if you're interested in her materials. I encourage you to listen to the interview. Karen actually wrote to me recently and said people are still coming to her website from this interview, which was done, let's see, number 370. So 100 episodes ago, probably 2 years ago. So she said she is still giving out the curriculum on her website, even though she's not as actively involved because her own job changed, her job description and the work she's doing changed. So again, changes are happening everywhere, but you can still go to datewithdeathclub.com if you want to download the material that Reverend Karen Johnston has to offer. And I'm just really grateful for her. So I wanted you to be able to meet her and learn about what she's offering. Next, episode 421, a more recent interview with Dr. Quinn Galloway Salazar about her course, Caring for Veterans Through the End of Life. This is another free course that Quinn created, and it's being offered through psycharmor.org, and it is a course on caring for veterans. And so Quinn and I in this interview talk about why some of the issues facing veterans at the end of life are unique and need to be recognized, who can benefit from her free course that's available through PsychArmor, why end of life education is important for veterans and their loved ones, why healthcare providers in all specialties could use additional training in working with veterans in a compassionate manner. And this is a really important topic. If you haven't heard about Quinn's work yet, or if you missed this episode, I encourage you to check it out. And then also going to the psycharmor.org website. And I can read the URL, but it will be in the show notes, psycharmor.org/ and this is all hyphenated, caring for veterans through end of life, hyphens between each one of those words. Again, it's long, it'll be in the show notes. If you want to check out the course that that Quinn has put together. It's amazing and beautiful, and everyone should check it out because it's also free on the Psych Armor website. So take a look at it because you may want to refer other people to this course. You may be inspired by some of these ideas to include some of the things you learn in your own teaching around veterans. Next, my friends Elizabeth Johnson and Erin Collins, we talked together about meeting the end of life needs of your community in episode 350. And uh, Elizabeth and Erin talk all about the compassionate communities model of care, how they utilize it in their Peaceful Presence project. And we discuss the importance of integrating palliative care into daily life, how to reclaim death care as a social event with a medical component, and then also talking about surveying the community for strengths and weaknesses around end of life issues to determine areas of need. And this is all a really important part of our compassionate communities model that we've been putting together in our think tank, which I'm going to mention in the next episode. So, this is part of the foundation and the basis for compassionate communities that we put together. If you've listened to a lot of episodes, you may know that Elizabeth and Erin and Quinn Galloway Salazar and I, all four teamed up to form a think tank around compassionate communities. And I'm going to mention that. I'll just say their website is thepeacefulpresenceproject.org. I encourage you to check it out. And they have many resources there that you can utilize. But then also, this is where in episode 447, Quinn Galloway Salazar, Elizabeth Johnson, and Erin Collins and I all four came together in order to talk to you about our think tank, what we've been working on and putting together. And again, we review the compassionate communities model and how this model could benefit end of life care in the US in general, how the compassionate community approach can help us address specific issues. And that includes community death education, veteran care, the caregiver crisis. And so we have created the end of life friendly criteria, which is a simple tool that can be used to assess and map our communities. And then um, we have also put together a free presentation on the compassionate communities model. And so this is one of the most important parts of this conversation is to tell you about that free training that you can take. And it is featured on the Peaceful Presence Project website. There is a link to go to Thinkific where you can participate in our course. And each one of us teaches a portion of the course. And again, it's all free. We're going to be offering additional information as time goes on and additional support. So to check out this episode if you missed it and you're interested at all in compassionate communities, in teaching around end of life awareness, uh, please do take a listen. And again, this is another free course that you should take advantage of that's just sitting there waiting for you if you want to learn more about compassionate communities. And so I think you'll find that valuable as well. Next, another little series on hosting an event, because sometimes one of the best ways of teaching or increasing death awareness is to actually have a community wide event. So I have a number of episodes that just deal with types of events you could create in your community. All of these are very old. They're back from maybe the first year, first or yeah, probably the first year when I started doing the podcast. They're old episodes, so the sound quality isn't as good. Uh, the graphics don't look as good. There's a lot of things I didn't do so well back then, but they're still worth listening to because they contain a lot of worthwhile information. So, all the way back to episode 29, How to Start a Death Cafe with Betsy Trapasso. And this is great. A death cafe is such a good way of increasing death awareness in your community. And it is a fairly low effort, low investment way to get started and to also gauge the interest in end of life events in your community. You can put up a flyer for a death cafe and see if people respond and show up. And first of all, you'll be meeting a lot of interesting people there that you may discover um, want to do their own teaching around end of life or have their own interest. And you may find people you can collaborate and work together with in your community, but you'll be doing a great service for your community if you decide to start a death cafe. So listen to my conversation with Betsy. I wasn't the greatest interviewer, I don't think, back then, but Betsy has a lot to share about starting Death Cafe in Los Angeles and how she did that and some of her experiences there. So that's episode 29, all the way back in the past. In episode 33, I talked about how to start an end of life book club. um, this episode just has some practical tips on how you might do your own book club. I created a template with some like topics to cover and then, a suggested book title for each one of the topics. So there are 12 topics, a different topic per month in this template, which you can download if you go back and take a listen to the book club episode. And then I'll connect you. I've also, as you may know, started an end of life online reading group, and I have about 5 years worth of books, tons of book titles there that you could take a look at if you want to start your own book club. In episode 52, I talked about how to start an end of life film series in your community, like how to set it up, how to access films, and some. I have a list of end of life films that I created a few years ago. So there are even more films available now, and you can probably find more that you could add to this list. But it's a good place to get started if you're interested in doing a film series. A fantastic idea for a community, or if you make a film series part of a larger event where you bring the community together, show a special film, and have a discussion afterwards. It can be really powerful. Um, Episode 32 is how to plan an EOL event for your community with Ashley Benem. And so this is a discussion about an event that she started in her community from scratch and put together um, a multifactorial event, lots of different things happening at the same time, bringing in speakers, having workshops, and a really spectacular event that she created, and just how she did it, starting all by herself to put this together. I love this episode because it had some really positive tips in case you're interested in creating an event. Again, the event, this is old, so it happened a number of years ago. The links in this episode are probably not going to be active anymore, or websites. I just wanted you to hear our conversation and get inspired if you're thinking you might like to create an end of life event in your community. And likewise, episode 74, I also talked with Holly Pruett and her lessons from a death positive event. She also created a very successful event in her community. Those two episodes together have a lot of tips in them. I encourage you to start an event if you're interested in doing that. It's an amazing way to bring people together and to really move the needle in your community around death awareness. It's a lot of work, and you need to get a head start and plan ahead, maybe a year in advance in order to do it. But I encourage you to, if that sounds appealing to you, listen to these two older episodes, 32 and 74, and get some tips and maybe some inspiration for getting started. Next, more on Death Cafe. More recently, in episode 335, I interviewed Megan Mooney about Death Cafe. She manages, or has managed the Death Cafe Facebook page And we talk a lot about the history of Death Cafe, what happens during a typical Death Cafe, what it takes to be a facilitator. So, this will also, in addition to the Betsy Trapasso episode I mentioned before, this will really help you if you're trying to decide if you'd like to start a Death Cafe. And we talk about why we need more Death Cafes in every community, how Death Cafe survived the pandemic by shifting to virtual meetings. Because if you live in a smaller community and you don't feel like you would have enough participants to make a kind of a viable Death Cafe that could meet on a regular basis, then you might want to have virtual meetings that could reach out to a much broader regional area and attract people online to attend. And I did a virtual Death Cafe over a conference call line for about 3 years, and it was wonderful. I loved it. It was once a month we met, different people showed up every time, and I just loved it. And so I really encourage you, consider a Death Cafe one way or another, online or in person in your community. It's so valuable. And then we also share why and how to start your own Death Cafe, just, step by step, what you need to do to create a Death Cafe. And you can also go to deathcafe.com, and they have um, a whole area of the website that talks about how to create your own Death Cafe. But get started by listening to episode 335 with Megan Mooney about Death Cafe, cake, coffee, and talking about death. Um, and next, episode 374 with Lisa Paul and Lori Lo Cicero. And we talk about why we need to talk about death. And we talk about the Death Deck, which Lisa and Lori created, which is a conversation card game that you can play in a group of people, drawing cards that ask questions that you can answer and discuss together. And we talk about how the Death Deck, this card game, helps inspire conversations about death. They've also created a new version, the EOL deck. That's available now, and it's been out for a while, which specifically focuses on people who are facing terminal illness or at the end of life, um, to go deeper on end of life decisions that need to be made. The Death Deck itself is a little lighter and broader in its scope. And so, more for people who are not yet at the very end of life, but people who just need to get over some of their discomfort and start talking a little bit more about death. Um, Lori shares in this episode how she and her husband would have benefited from talking about these issues before he became ill. And both of them share creative ideas for using the Death Deck in various situations. The Death Deck is something everyone should own, a deck of these cards, also the EOL deck, because it's so helpful. If you teach a class, the Death Deck and EOL deck are perfect icebreakers that you can utilize to get people talking to one another. You can break out in small groups, draw cards, and have conversations at the beginning of each class or at the beginning of your workshop. It's a fantastic way of getting people to start talking, and lots of people are using it right now. And I encourage you to have the deck on hand, because it will be very useful to you if you are teaching, and it could be great in a high school or college class as an icebreaker as well. So you can go to the deathdeck.com to learn more about the Death Deck, but also take a listen to episode 374 with Lisa Paul and Lori Lo Cicero. And next, episode 403, Death Over Drafts, meeting people where they are, with Stephanie Elkins. Stephanie started this super fun event, Death Over Drafts, where people gather and meet together in a brewery, share a draft, and talk about death and dying. I got to be a speaker for a Death Over Drafts locally here, which was so much fun. So there's a topic, a speaker who speaks briefly, I think oftentimes the death deck is used at death overdraft meetings. People sit around tables, eat appetizers, share a beverage together, and talk about death and dying. It's super fun. And it's such a great way to spread death awareness to a little bit different group of people than the usual people, and people who might not show up for a death cafe but would have a great time showing up for death over drafts. And I noticed that there were people who weren't attending our death over drafts but who saw the signs, the table placards, the special coasters that Stephanie had made, and were curious and wanting to know, like, wow, what are these people doing? They're having a great time drinking draft beer and talking about death. And so it's really, really fun. And Stephanie and I talk about who attends death over drafts and examples of the kinds of conversations that have taken place. Again, why it's so important that we talk about death, increase death awareness. Also, why we need to meet people where they are. And that's something Death Over Drafts does very well. We need to bring our death conversations and death education to various venues and spaces in order to meet people where they hang out and where they're showing up. If we really want to spread it, Stephanie shares how to bring death over drafts to your own community. And I encourage you to consider that if it sounds like fun to you or kind of fits your vibe. It's really fun. So I encourage you to consider that. And don't miss listening to episode 403, Death Overdrafts, Meeting People Where They Are with Stephanie Elkins. You can also go to deathoverdrafts.com and learn more about the Death Overdrafts movement. So I have a free handout that you can sign up for and download called Teaching Guidelines for a Death and Dying Class. And if you're interested in teaching, these are just some guidelines that can help you get started putting together a class. And they've been downloaded many, many times, and many people have been using them to help them as they start thinking through what they might like to teach and how to teach it. Um, the link to get the teaching guidelines will be on the show notes for this episode, EOLU podcast.com, episode 469. So go there if you would like to download the teaching guidelines to look at. And one of the things you'll learn about at the end of the guidelines is that I also have a course, a death and dying class instructor training that you can sign up for if you want even more information. And I created this. Now, this instructor training does not provide you with a curriculum to teach. The training is literally the nuts and bolts of how do you put together a workshop or a class. How do you organize it? How long should it be? When should you take breaks? What kind of topics might you cover? How would you structure it? How many sessions should it have? Those are all the topics that I cover. It's really the nuts and bolts of structuring the course itself and organizing a course, but not the curriculum, not the content of what you should teach. Although I do share some resources that have some content in it, but the course itself is specifically to learn how you even get started thinking about the framework for what does a course look like. And I created this because the first time I was asked to teach a workshop, I had no idea where to begin. Like, how long should it last? How long do I spend on a topic? How do I introduce it? How do I get started? How do I structure this? How do I flow the material through the class? And how do I write a description of my class and what it's about? So after learning all these things on my own, as I began to do more and more teaching, I thought, hey, I'm going to pass on everything I've learned to other people in case they would like to know about this, in case they want to teach as well. So this is my little course I put together. It has just 4 modules in it: death and dying class instructor training. You'll find out more about it at eoluniversity.com/courses on that website. And it links you to the page on Samcart where you can purchase the course. It's only $59 if you're interested in checking it out. And again, it's self-paced online. If you'd like to take it, no pressure there. I just wanted to let you know about it for anyone who, like me, feels insecure about doing this teaching. So go to eoluniversity.com/courses. And again, there will be a link in the show notes for this episode. So that is my playlist on death education. I hope you go back and listen to some of these episodes that you may have missed and that you find a lot of value there. Um, if you are interested or able to support the podcast financially, there are three different ways you can make a contribution. One is to buy me a coffee, and that's good if you enjoy a particular episode. You might want to click on that buy me a coffee link, you know, send me $5. And I trust me, I will drink the coffee. I love coffee, so I will have a coffee if you buy me one. You can also make a donation on PayPal, a one-time donation of any amount you choose on PayPal. I have a special link you can use for that. And the third way is to join my community on Patreon, where I provide bonuses like the end of life news update every month. I go through and curate special news items around end of life issues and do a little summary of those for you. I also have a brief list of what to watch every month. So, programming that deals with death, dying, or grief. So, kind of interesting and unique ideas of what to watch. Sometimes I have bonus interviews or extras from interviews. And there's also physical merchandise there that you'll get as a bonus when you join the Patreon team. And that's at patreon.com/EOLU. You can also find links for all of these on the show notes at eolupodcast.com, or you can go to eoluniversity.com/support. I know this is a lot. I'm giving you tons of URLs. If you're only listening to the audio, you're going to feel overwhelmed. I encourage you, go to the show notes, get the slides, or get the handout for this episode that will have links in it. And that will help you if you really want to go back and take a listen to all of these episodes from the past. I encourage you to do it. I hope you find whatever you're looking for there. And I hope that you'll be inspired to go on and do your own teaching. So I'll see you next time. I hope you found that podcast playlist useful and that you'll go back and listen to some of the previous episodes. I know I covered a lot, a ton. You know, at this point, after all these years, the archives are huge for this podcast, but I figure if you don't know what's there, you can't take advantage of it. So maybe you'll pick out one or two of the older episodes that will serve you so you can become an educator for your community and improve death awareness and make the world a better place at the same time. So I'll see you next time with another new interview when I come back. Bye bye.